Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've been well. Another eventful week or so, a couple weeks. We have a horrific and evil shooting in Minneapolis. A deranged person walked outside of a Catholic school and shot from the outside into the building, killing 2 children and injuring about 20, I believe. And also, we're kind of in real time witnessing this paramilitary force growing through ICE. ICE is getting an incredible amount of funding right now, and they're just onboarding more and more people, arming them, putting them in masks, and basically letting them do whatever they want. There's no due process as they abduct people, pretty much based on just racial profiling. If you have a Mexico sticker on the back of your car, you'll get pulled over for it. And this is concerning, right? This is very concerning. It's essentially, this is what the Second Amendment is for. Once authoritarian forces start building up a military that's loyal specifically to them as a person rather than loyal to the country, there needs to be that equal and opposite stabilizing force of citizens who are powerful enough in and of themselves as individuals to at least make the government scared of its citizens. That's really the point. So we're going to talk about those two things, but we're also going to talk about just how can we move forward and avoid violence as best as we can for ourselves. How can we stay out of unnecessarily dangerous situations in the next several years as they unfold? And more broadly, how can we prevent violence from breaking out unnecessarily, right? I mean, we probably won't be able to prevent it, spoiler alert, in its entirety, because it's just a matter of time before someone throws a rock at an ICE agent or something, or maybe there's just a loud noise and these poorly trained people who are armed with deadly weapons and who are not accountable for their actions will commit a massacre on the American people. It's a matter of weeks, probably. I just don't know how you could deploy that many people who are poorly trained in a volatile situation and not have a massacre occur. So we're not going to be able to prevent that, but as individuals, as people in our community, we can think about how we can at least be a force in a small way for stability, communication, and resisting the authoritarian military takeover, right? So in order to do that, we're going to talk about communication, which is, it sounds like a boring place to start, but I heard Sam Harris say once that we live in a perpetual choice between conversation and violence. These are the only two options that we have. And I think that to a very large degree, for decades, really, our ability to communicate has gotten worse and worse. Our sense-making abilities, capacities at a society level have degraded. And I think that we all feel that. And not only does it contribute to kind of the sense of division, but it also contributes to the lack of just coherence. Like, what is reality? What's actually happening right now? Like, what's happening in America? Is this sort of what the people voted for? Is this kind of a perfect enactment of democracy? Or is this a complete authoritarian takeover that we're watching in real time? Is Israel and Gaza, is Israel committing a genocide against the Palestinian people? Or is that just a complete twisted perversion of reality that is anti-Semitic in nature, and Israel is the most moral army in the world, right? Like, completely different versions of reality that educated people, really, or any people, can't seem to agree on. So we're going to talk about that. And ultimately, the coherence of these theories is not the problem. The problem is trying to get access to reality. Like, what is the truth of the situation? I think many of us, we consume content maybe from pundits or news shows and we watch a person talk about current events, right? And those people, maybe they're journalists who also do punditry, but a lot of times they're not journalists. They're just pundits. They're people who talk and give their opinions and basically tell us what to think. They tell us how to frame the issue, and they do it subtly by just the things, the information that they choose to give in the first place, what narrow slice of events they present, but also they tell us how to think in the way that they frame the situation, the language they use, and all that. So that's how a lot of us consume the quote unquote news, right? That's how we get in touch with reality. But even that is not reality. It's just a person's opinion being disseminated out. So journalism, true journalism, is the thing that plugs us in and connects us to reality beyond our everyday life. So I'm in touch with reality that is here and now, in my home, in my neighborhood. I drove into Wilmington and got dinner and then came home. So I'm aware of the smallest slice of the world you could imagine, but I still need to have opinions and ideas about what's happening in the state and what's happening in my country and what's happening in the world. And the only way for me to actually know that and get in touch with that reality is through good journalism. People who simply turn on the cameras and do their best to expose the viewer to what's happening on the ground. And I have some favorite sources, but I don't know, maybe I'll just put that in the links of who my favorite places to go are. But that's not the point. The point is, we so often construct coherent ideas about reality, which makes sense. They're not illogical, they're not self-contradictory. It's a story that makes sense and is often compelling and believable. But we forget how important it is that it's actually connected to reality, that it's true. We assume things are true if they sound reasonable, right? If someone is on the screen of a computer or TV telling a story that sounds reasonable and everything checks out and we're like, yeah, that makes sense and lines up with my worldview, then, it just seems credible. But I think we have to increasingly be skeptical of the people who are maybe telling a really good story, but who are really obfuscating the truth. People who are criticizing, censoring, or killing journalists, because that's the only tether to reality that we have. It's kind of like, it's hard to detect when this sort of thing is happening. But imagine if you read the Harry Potter books, all 7 books. It's an incredible story. It's fictional, but it's coherent, it's compelling, it has a lot of meaning inside of it. And so by the end of these books, you read the story and Harry is the good guy and Voldemort is the bad guy. That's the narrative. But let's say you finish those books and then you walk outside and you see Harry Potter beating up a little kid and taking his lunch money. And you think, well, that's pretty weird. That doesn't line up with the last 7 books I just read. I just spent years building up the narrative of who that person was or who's good and who's bad. And I just had this crazy experience where it didn't match that. But just one little thing is pretty easy to dismiss or explain away, right? It was a mistake, right? Or maybe the kid had it coming. But then, you walk down the street a little bit more and then you see Voldemort. and he's serving at a food kitchen line, giving people soup. And you think, what a loser. He's probably just doing that to help his image. He's a horrible person. I know he's a horrible person. I've known that for years. He's probably just faking it. But eventually you see enough raw data, just raw information, evidence, in a word, that doesn't line up with the story that you've been told about the world or about a person or about a country. And you hit a breaking point where it's the ontological shock, where a lot of these foundational orientating assumptions that you had about the world just break, and you realize, I don't know if this is true anymore, and whether that's, I don't know if I believe that my country is the good guys anymore. I don't know if I can really stand by the last 20 years of American interventionism. I was very young when 9/11 happened, so I don't know what that experience was like, but I'm willing to bet that such a horrific event was just deeply traumatizing to the American psyche and culture, and absolutely fueled the justification for years and years of going into Iraq and Afghanistan. And I get that. I wasn't there. But, you can hear many stories of soldiers that come home and they have this sense of disillusionment because they really just feel like it was for nothing. And there's betrayal. It's tough. You kind of break a little bit. And that's such an unpleasant experience that we really work hard to avoid it. Like I was saying, you can get quite a few data points before you actually cave and say, I don't know anything anymore. Now, to me, this is why I'm so skeptical of two things. I'm so skeptical of Israel because while I can appreciate the coherence of two very different stories, I think that there's one party who's working really hard to make sure that people are getting less information rather than more, right? It's hard to say that all journalists are Hamas propagandists. Oh, well, they talked to Hamas once, so therefore their journalism is skewed, and no information is better than whatever information they're going to give you. There's so much, anyways. So many of those instances, okay, you're allowed to drop aid from planes and helicopters, but you're not allowed to film, right? And if you film any of that, then you're going to be banned from dropping aid. Things like that. And also just the many journalists that they've clearly targeted and killed, the Israeli government. That while I can see both sides, that the fact that there's one party trying to cut the tie there to ground truth, it makes me at least, maybe I don't know that the other side is correct, but I do know that I can't trust them. And I do know that I can't trust ICE as an agency because what's going on with the masks? Why is there the obfuscation of transparency? One of the best things I think that came out of the Black Lives Matter movement was more body cameras, just cameras, more evidence, more connection to reality, what's really happening. It's just a good thing for making sense of what's going on in the world. No matter what your opinion is, it helps tie us down. And so I'm just skeptical of that. So that's the biggest thing. And at the end of the day, evidence can completely flip what the position should be. So let's say with immigration, well, I can tell two completely different stories here where many of the immigrants from Mexico and around the world are dangerous and violent, and their culture is so different from ours that it kind of erodes societal trust. It makes our cities less safe, and it drains our resources, right? Like, I can make a very coherent, compelling argument that all those things are true. And I could also make a coherent argument that the number of criminals who are being deported is very small relative to the completely innocent. And look, I know illegal entry to the country is a crime, but innocent in the sense that they're not committing any additional crimes while living here, and they're working hard and they're contributing to society. And, like, it's a delusion. Truly, this is not making society meaningfully safer, and it's just incredibly inhumane, and it's ripping families apart. And the preservation of families in America is exactly the thing we're trying to defend, right? So I think that here's how I think it maybe worked before that actually functioned democratically. People like to poo-poo on anecdotal evidence as opposed to statistical evidence. But I think anecdotal evidence works completely fine in a democratic system for the following reason. Let's say I have 1 million people. Some of them live in cities, some of them live on farms, some of them live in suburbs, some of them live on the coast, some of them live near the border, some of them live inland, right? They're in completely different situations, and they have different real life experiences. Let's say 20% of the population has a really negative experience with immigrants. They see and experience crime in their homes, or not in their homes, but in their communities with their own eyes. And technically that's all anecdotal, right? It's just that one person has that one experience. And maybe the people who live in cities have a different experience. They're completely fine, and they just see Jose helped them with their drywall, and that was incredible, and he's a super nice guy. And then that's anecdotal experience, and people have those different anecdotes. And so they take those anecdotes to form beliefs, and they'll form very different beliefs about immigrants. And then they go vote about what we should do. And 20% of the people would vote for, hey, let's deport immigrants. But then maybe the other 80% would say, no, immigrants are fine, they're great, and I should be allowed to stay. And so whatever, it's an 80-20 vote. They get to stay. And society has made a rational decision based only on people forming beliefs on anecdotal evidence, right? There was no need for assessment of statistics in this system. And I think that's maybe a shocking realization for people who love to consume news and know what's going on, like I do. You would say, how on earth could a democracy function if people aren't educated about what's happening everywhere in the country? And the reality is, it works if people just vote based on what their real life experience is. It's balanced in that way. And part of what's kind of broken now with the various iterations of media is that our beliefs are not really formed based on personal experiences as much anymore. Of course, they are to a large extent, and it depends on what kind of topic, right? Like, our opinions about Iraq and Afghanistan are very rarely formed on firsthand experience. But other aspects of our life are. Let's say we're interacting with state regulators who tell us what we can and can't do with our house. Or me, I was just attempting to purchase my first firearm, and I was learning all of the very specific and kind of absurd rules about, okay, you can't have a stock that adjusts. It has to be fixed. And it's frustrating. Like you have those personal experiences for some that inform certain beliefs about politics. But then there's many other things that your beliefs are just informed by pundits who talk on your computer and TV. And gone are the days of that distributed anecdotal sense making. Like that dynamic is completely thrown out the window. And all of a sudden you have a couple of highly centralized people, organizations, and individuals who are just sort of disseminating their singular perspective to a mass group of people. And it's sort of based on entertainment value, but also just whatever happens to resonate with the people who are listening. So instead of having a personal experience, I'm seeing reality and I'm kind of letting it react with me and who I am as a person. I'm just finding people who I think I like and find authoritative, and then I listen to them. And those are very different processes for forming beliefs, right? They both kind of feel truthy in the sense that, okay, I'm listening to a person, I'm seeing reality, and I'm forming beliefs, right? They both feel pretty natural, but what you're doing underneath the hood is quite different. And the result is it doesn't seem to work very well. And even if you're tuned into a news channel that uses statistics as best as they can, they're the collegiate elite class, the big brain class. Statistics can tell many different stories, as we all know. And it's not a guarantee that as a whole, that system of belief dissemination and then the following democratic process will lead to a good place. There's no guarantee of that because there's a different mechanic going on in terms of the sense-making apparatus. So, I don't know what the future is. I don't know where society is going to end up. I certainly am not optimistic about everyone coming together and watching really high quality journalism for hours and hours a day. No one has time for that. The reality is the scale of our country and the current media environment has, broken our sense-making capacities. And things are kind of going off the rails a little bit. And I think in response to this, the organic response has been two things. I think that the last true, I don't know, it feels like democracy sort of died off in the 2016 election when Bernie Sanders had Democratic popular support. And the DNC just snubbed him completely. Even in states where he got more votes than Hillary Clinton, superdelegates just decided to override that, give Hillary the extra votes, and nominate her as candidate. To me, that felt like, all right, the establishment has, at least on the left side, has stamped out democratic consent. They don't value it. They don't care. And then on the right, at least now, and I think many people have been saying this for a long time, but the right is leaning more and more authoritarian is kind of the other response. Of like, okay, as we exit democracy, the thing that we all sense is not working for a country of our size and maybe place in the world or whatever, where do we go? And some people go towards kind of the bureaucratic elite or technocratic. Actually, I don't even want to say. I think technocracy is a different thing. The bureaucratic, educated elite class making all the decisions, or an authoritarian leader leading the government. There's kind of this organic division of where we should go politically at a systemic level. So anyways, that's where I think things are going. I don't have any delusions about things cleaning up super nicely. But as individuals, we can contribute to our local sense making, as I'm trying to do now, by communicating well with each other and also being as powerful as possible in the event that it's necessary, right? I mentioned that I'm purchasing a firearm and intend to be well trained with it. I think that's a responsibility that I've neglected up until this point, but clearly it's necessary. But there's a long on-ramp that we need to make use of as we interact with other members of our society, other nodes. If we don't want things to escalate too quickly, we need to start at the very smallest level with being polite. And it sounds silly, but it's the very first defense. As Sam Harris said, right? We live in constant decision between conversation and violence. How well we perform conversation is our first line of defense. Part of conversation is greeting people that you don't know. It's being polite. It's engaging. It's being kind. It's talking about things that make you emotional, but still pulling it off in a graceful way. Like, conversation is a skill that needs to be honed. It's the thing that allows our society to think at a broader scale. And it's also the thing that prevents violence from breaking out down the road. I think there's a quote, right? Like, an armed society is a polite society, because when you understand that other people have the capacity for violence and are dangerous, you respect the need to be polite and actually engage with them at the lower levels of volatility. And you're good at actually de-escalating conflict and forming connections with people. It is the safeguard for violence breaking out. And I think that's maybe a final encouragement here, is to say that as we see violence break out in different parts of the country, and even in the world, I suppose, being very careful which battles you pick, literally. To a large degree, ideas own and possess and animate people. Ideas are in control of what people are doing and what they act out. And just, there are many conflicts that are not worth engaging in. I think that you can see a faction of the left, while the broader culture war has sort of dissolved and ended when Trump was elected. You can sort of feel that sense of just dissolution. There is a small faction of the left that is just becoming more radical and more violent. And they will be consumed by their own ideology, right? They will be driven to violent acts, and they will probably kill some people on the way out, and then they will kill themselves or be killed, right? We've seen a couple of CEOs and executives being shot. Probably some of that, some of the extreme mental illness of people just... Mental illness probably isn't the right word. It's this possession of chaotic, evil nihilism that some people have that causes them to go kill children and other just completely innocent people. We're going to see that. We're going to see that from that group of people who will double down. And as much as possible, like, we should protect ourselves, we should protect our families. But adding more fuel to certain fires is not going to help them burn out quicker. Keeping those violent conflicts small and as transitory as possible so that they end quickly and we can move forward, It's tough, but I am not going to be able to stop the actions of hundreds of millions of other people in this country. They'll do what they will do. The story will unfold, and the natural consequences of people's beliefs and ideas will play out if the people allow those ideas to kind of possess them and drive them to that final point. And Of course, there are some things worth fighting for, but I think it's always good to step back and wonder if you're being possessed by an ideology to enter a conflict that you just don't need to be a part of, that you could just sit it out, protect yourself and your family, and continue going to work and helping people as best you can and building and making things, making the world a better place, right? Because even if the American empire falls, the people will still be there. Hopefully we'll still be here. And it's a lesson that maybe one day the American government will learn, but it seems like they won't. That the way to solve conflicts is not to add more weapons and more more involvement, right? It doesn't make things end quicker. That's for sure. So I think that's it for tonight. I hope to speak to you all soon. Please, if this is an interesting topic, I would love to have conversations with any of you about it. Please reach out. And Godspeed as we navigate days, weeks, years to come. Good night.